Imagine for a second that you're standing in your living room in April 2020. The world is locked down, your gym is closed, you're bored, scrolling Instagram, and there it is, a Peloton ad. Beautiful people in perfect lighting with inspirational music. They're not just exercising, they're transforming, building community, living their best life. And you think, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what I need. So you drop $2,400 on the bike, another $40 a month for the subscription. You tell yourself this is an investment in your health. Fast forward 3 months. That bike is now the world's most expensive clothes rack. You used it maybe 12 times. Welcome to the Peloton delusion, the greatest exercise in self-deception since the shake weight. This isn't just your failure. Millions of people did exactly this. And a company with a $50 billion valuation is now circling bankruptcy. Today, we're dissecting the most expensive fitness fraud in modern history. March 2020, the world locks down, gyms close their doors, offices send everyone home. People are trapped in their houses with nothing to do and nowhere to go. And Peloton's order system crashes because demand explodes so fast, their servers literally can't handle the traffic. To understand how we got from a $50 billion valuation to total collapse, you need to go back to the moment when everything looked perfect, when Peloton looked like the smartest bet in Silicon Valley. Let's rewind. September 2019, Peloton goes public at $29 per share. The stock immediately tanks to $20. Wall Street is skeptical. They see an overpriced exercise bike with a tablet duct taped to the handlebars. They see limited market potential. They see a fad that'll burn out in 18 months. Then the pandemic hits. Suddenly, everyone is stuck at home. Your gym? Closed indefinitely. Your spin class? Canceled. Your excuses? Gone. Peloton goes from overpriced luxury item to the only way to stay sane during lockdown. The numbers were insane. Q2 2020, revenue jumped 172% year over year. Subscriptions surged to 3.1 million members. The company's factories were running 24/7 shifts and still couldn't keep up with demand. People were waiting 3 months for delivery. There were waiting lists for the waiting lists. And the stock, it went vertical. From $20 to $50, then $100, then $170 by January 2021. That's an 850% gain in less than a year. Investment firms were tripping over themselves to upgrade their price targets. Wall Street completely lost its mind. Analysts who'd been bearish 6 months earlier were now writing research reports with headlines like, "Peloton, the future of fitness has arrived." Price targets climbed to $200, then $250, then $300. The narrative was simple and seductive. Peloton had revolutionized home fitness. They'd created an entirely new category. The pandemic proved that people didn't need gyms anymore. They could get the same community, the same motivation, the same transformation from their living room. Management believed every word of it. CEO John Foley said in an earnings call, "This is our future pulled forward." Translation: the pandemic just accelerated what was always going to happen. People were always destined to abandon gyms for connected home fitness. COVID just sped up the inevitable timeline. So Peloton made a bet, a massive, all-in, bet the company decision. They spent $420 million to acquire Precor, a commercial fitness equipment maker, purely to boost manufacturing capacity. They leased massive warehouse facilities across the US and Europe. They hired thousands of delivery workers, customer service reps, software engineers. They built a brand new factory in Ohio. They expanded aggressively into Germany, the UK, Australia. It was a spending spree based on one core assumption. This demand is permanent. But there was a problem. A massive, fundamental, absolutely can't ignore it problem with the business model itself. And somehow, nobody in the C-suite wanted to talk about it. What kind of business is Peloton? It's a simple question with massive implications. And the answer determines whether you're looking at the next Netflix or the next Bowflex gathering dust in someone's garage. Peloton desperately wanted Wall Street to believe they were a tech company. a subscription business built on recurring revenue, high margins, and infinite scalability. The Netflix of fitness, the Spotify of sweat. They weren't. They were a hardware company pretending to be a software company. And that lie, that fundamental deception, is what made the whole thing a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze. Let's look at the actual numbers. When you buy a Peloton, you pay $2,400 up front for the bike and $40 a month for the subscription that gives you access to live and on-demand classes. In investor presentations, Peloton loved to emphasize that $40 monthly fee. They called it connected fitness. They talked endlessly about building community. They used Silicon Valley buzzwords like ecosystem and platform and engagement metrics. But here's the reality they tried to bury. About 85% of Peloton's revenue came from selling hardware, the bike, the treadmill, physical objects that cost real money to manufacture, ship, assemble, warehouse, and support. Only about 15% came from subscriptions. That's not a tech company. That's a glorified exercise equipment manufacturer that strapped a tablet to handlebars and hired a good marketing team. Real software as a service businesses, the kind Wall Street pays 10 times or 20 times revenue multiples for, have gross margins of 70% to 80%. Once you build the software, the marginal cost of adding another user is basically zero, a few cents of server capacity. Peloton's gross margins? Around 30% on hardware sales. Because every single bike costs money to build, and every single bike has to be shipped by truck to someone's house and carried up 3 flights of stairs by 2 delivery workers making $20 an hour. Think about the logistics nightmare. Each bike weighs 135 pounds. It requires specialized packaging to prevent damage. It has to be assembled in the customer's home by trained technicians. If something breaks, you can't just push a software update. You have to send a technician to the house or ship replacement parts that weigh another 30 pounds. This is not Netflix. This is not Spotify. This is manufacturing with all the headaches that come with it. And here's the kicker. Even the subscription business wasn't as sticky as they claimed. The average Peloton customer stays subscribed for about 3 years. Then they stop. The initial excitement fades. The bike becomes furniture. The subscription gets canceled. Churn rates were climbing even during the pandemic boom, when people literally had nothing else to do but sit at home. But Peloton kept pitching the Silicon Valley dream. In earnings calls, executives barely mentioned hardware sales. They focused obsessively on subscriber growth, engagement minutes, retention metrics, monthly active users. They wanted analysts to value them like a SaaS company, not a bike manufacturer competing with decades-old brands like Schwinn. And for a while, during the pandemic insanity, it worked. Wall Street bought it, retail investors bought it, and millions of customers bought the $2,400 bike. Then vaccines arrived, the world reopened, and Peloton's growth story ran headfirst into a brick wall called reality. Q4 2021. The numbers come in. Revenue down 23% year over year. For the first time since the pandemic started, Peloton is shrinking. Wall Street analysts on the earnings call sound genuinely confused. Wait, what happened? Aren't you guys supposed to be the future of fitness? Here's what happened. Summer 2021. Vaccines roll out across America and Europe. Gyms reopen their doors. People remember that leaving the house is actually kind of nice. That seeing other humans in person isn't the worst thing in the world. And suddenly, nobody wants to buy a $2,400 exercise bike anymore. The demand didn't just slow down, it fell off a cliff. Peloton's management tried desperately to spin it. They called it a temporary adjustment period. They blamed seasonal slowdown and supply chain normalization. They assured investors that growth would resume once consumers finished their post-pandemic adjustment. They had charts and projections showing everything was fine. They were either lying or deluded, probably both. The reality was brutal math that anyone with a calculator could have predicted. There are only so many people in America willing to spend $2,400 on a stationary bike. Peloton had already sold to most of them during the pandemic. The total addressable market wasn't infinite. It was finite, and it was saturated. Think about who actually buys a Peloton. Upper middle class professionals with disposable income. People with spare rooms or garages. People who care about boutique fitness experiences. That's not 100 million Americans. That's maybe 10 million households. And by late 2021, Peloton had already converted a huge percentage of that narrow demographic. Everyone who was going to buy one already did. International expansion wasn't going to save them either. Turns out, people in other countries think $2,400 for an exercise bike is completely insane. In Europe, gym memberships cost $30 a month and are everywhere. In Asia, outdoor exercise is free and deeply embedded in the culture. Peloton's premium luxury positioning made them unaffordable and culturally irrelevant in most global markets. The stock started to collapse. $170 in January 2021, down to $100 by summer, then $50 by November. Analysts who'd been screaming buy 6 months earlier started quietly downgrading their ratings. One Morgan Stanley report literally said, "We significantly overestimated the total addressable market and the sustainability of pandemic demand." No kidding. But the demand cliff wasn't even the worst part, because Peloton had just made a catastrophic supply chain bet based on growth that would never, ever materialize. Picture a warehouse in New Jersey. It's football field long. The ceiling is high enough to park a semi-truck inside, and it's completely stuffed, floor to ceiling, with Peloton bikes. Row after row after row of 135-pound exercise machines wrapped in plastic that nobody wants to buy. This warehouse is one of dozens Peloton leased in 2020 and 2021. The total value of unsold inventory sitting in these facilities across America? $1.3 billion. That's enough bikes to fill 200 football fields. Let that sink in. Here's what happened. In 2020 and early 2021, Peloton couldn't manufacture bikes fast enough to meet exploding demand. People were waiting 4 months for delivery and getting angry about it. So management made a bet. They assumed demand would stay high forever. They went all in on capacity. They bought Precor for $420 million to boost manufacturing. They built a brand new factory in Ohio designed to produce thousands of bikes per week. They leased massive warehouse space across the country to store inventory closer to customers. They signed long-term contracts with logistics companies and shipping firms at inflated pandemic rates. They hired thousands of workers to handle assembly, delivery, and customer service. The problem? By late 2021, demand evaporated overnight, and all those bikes they'd ordered from suppliers and manufactured in their shiny new factories, they were sitting in warehouses collecting dust and costing a fortune. Peloton couldn't discount them without destroying the luxury brand positioning they'd spent years building. You can't sell a $2,400 premium bike for $1,200 without admitting the original price was a scam. But they also couldn't return them to manufacturers. The bikes were already paid for, already built, already shipped, so they just sat there, bleeding cash. Storage costs alone were running over $50 million per quarter. Shipping contracts still had to be honored, even though there was nothing to ship anymore. The new Ohio factory was operating at 20% capacity, burning money on workers with nothing to do. In November 2021, Peloton announced they were pausing manufacturing to optimize inventory levels. Translation: we massively screwed up and now we're hemorrhaging cash trying to fix it. The company was burning through $500 million every single quarter. When a company is burning $500 million every 90 days, there's only one move left. The layoffs began. February 2022. The email goes out. 2,800 Peloton employees are laid off in a single day. That's 20% of the entire workforce. Most find out via Zoom. CEO John Foley appears on the call, voice cracking, with a prepared statement about difficult but necessary decisions to ensure Peloton's long-term viability and success. The people getting fired? Delivery workers who hauled 135-pound bikes up 3 flights of stairs. Warehouse staff who managed inventory nobody wanted. Customer service reps who dealt with angry customers whose bikes arrived broken. The ones who actually made the company run. Many of these people had been hired just 6 months earlier. Peloton had promised them stable careers at a fast-growing tech company. Some had relocated across the country for these jobs, moved their families to Ohio or Texas or Georgia to be near new distribution centers. They'd bought houses, enrolled their kids in schools, uprooted entire lives for what looked like a sure thing. Gone. Just like that. June 2022, another round hits, 780 more people cut. September 2022, another 500 gone. In 8 months, Peloton eliminated over 4,000 jobs, families destroyed, careers ended, all because management confused a pandemic with a permanent revolution. Now let's talk about the executives. CEO John Foley stepped down in February 2022, right when the layoffs started. Did he lose his job? Not exactly. He stayed on as executive chairman with a generous compensation package and kept millions of dollars worth of stock options. CFO Jill Woodworth left around the same time. She'd sold over $50 million in Peloton shares at the peak, perfectly timing her exit. Other C-suite executives cashed out too. They saw the writing on the wall and got their money out before the collapse. The board brought in Barry McCarthy, former CFO at Spotify and Netflix, a turnaround specialist, someone who knew how to cut costs and stop bleeding. His first major decision as CEO? More layoffs. This is the reality of every corporate disaster. The workers who actually make things happen get fired via Zoom call. The executives who made the catastrophic decisions walk away with tens of millions of dollars. While Peloton was busy imploding financially, something far worse was happening. The products themselves were becoming dangerous, and the company had known about it for months. March 2021, a 6-year-old child dies. The product was Peloton's Tread Plus, their $4,300 premium treadmill. The design had a fatal flaw. There was a gap at the rear of the machine where the belt met the floor. When the treadmill was running at high speed, small objects or children could get pulled underneath the belt, dragged under, trapped. The child was pulled under and killed. Peloton's initial response? Blame the parents. They issued a public statement saying users should keep children and pets away from the equipment at all times. CEO John Foley doubled down, saying in a press release that there was no reason to stop using the Tread Plus if you followed safety guidelines. The Consumer Product Safety Commission had a different view. They issued an urgent warning calling the product unsafe and urged all owners to stop using it immediately. Peloton fought back hard. They didn't want to do a recall. It would be expensive, embarrassing, and destroy the premium safety image they'd cultivated. But reports kept flooding in. Over 70 incidents documented. Children injured, some seriously, pets killed. Videos surfaced online showing just how dangerous the Gap design was. May 2021. Under massive public pressure and threats of regulatory action, Peloton finally issued a full recall. 125,000 Tread Plus units pulled from the market. The cost? $165 million in direct expenses, plus incalculable damage to their reputation as a premium wellness brand. But here's what really stings. Internal documents later revealed that engineers had flagged the rear gap design issue before the product even launched. They'd warned management in writing about the safety risk. They'd suggested simple modifications that would have eliminated the problem entirely. Management pushed ahead anyway. They had revenue targets to hit, quarterly projections to meet, a product launch schedule to maintain. Safety could wait. This is what happens when growth becomes the only thing that matters, when hitting numbers matters more than doing things right. A wellness brand, a company literally selling health and transformation, and they cut corners that got a child killed. So here we are, thousands laid off, billions lost, a child dead. What's left of Peloton in 2025? 1. Let's check in on our fitness revolution. The stock that hit $170 in January 2021, it's trading under $4 per share. That's a 97% loss from the peak. The market cap that topped $50 billion is now hovering around $1.2 billion. Peloton has destroyed more shareholder value than some countries' entire GDP. In May 2024, rumors started circulating that Peloton was exploring a sale or major restructuring. Private equity firms were circling like vultures. Industry analysts openly discussed bankruptcy as a realistic scenario. The company quietly hired financial advisors to evaluate strategic alternatives, which is corporate speak for, we're desperate and will consider anything, including liquidation. The subscription base is hemorrhaging. They've lost 30% of their peak membership. People are canceling in droves. Traditional gyms are thriving again. Cheaper alternatives like Echelon and Bowflex are eating what's left of the market. Peloton tried to pivot. They launched cheaper bike models to capture budget-conscious consumers. They partnered with Dick's Sporting Goods and Amazon to expand retail distribution. They created lower-priced subscription tiers for people without the hardware. Nothing worked. The brand is damaged beyond repair, the trust is gone, and the captive pandemic market isn't coming back. The used Peloton market tells you everything you need to know. Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist are absolutely flooded with barely used bikes selling for $400 to $500. That's 80% off the original price. These bikes are functionally identical to new ones, which means nobody with a functioning brain is paying $2,400 retail. Peloton is trapped in a death spiral. They can't slash prices without admitting the original pricing was absurd, but they can't maintain premium prices when used bikes are everywhere for pennies on the dollar. The cultural shift is complete. Owning a Peloton used to be aspirational, a status symbol. Now it's a punchline, a monument to pandemic panic buying and poor financial decisions. So what's the lesson? What can we actually learn from this $50 billion disaster? Is there a way to actually get fit? Yes, but not like this. Lesson 1. Virality is not value. Pandemic demand is not sustainable business. Just because everyone wants your product right now doesn't mean they'll want it in 18 months. Peloton mistook a temporary captive audience for a permanent market transformation. That's not strategy. That's delusion wearing a business plan. Lesson 2. You cannot fake business fundamentals with buzzwords. Peloton was a hardware company pretending to be a software company. They sold Wall Street on recurring revenue and tech company margins, but reality was manufacturing, logistics, and one-time sales. The illusion worked until it didn't. Lesson 3. Growth at all costs leads to cut corners and broken lives. When revenue targets matter more than safety, children die. When stock prices matter more than workers, thousands lose jobs while executives cash out with millions. For investors, scrutinize where revenue actually comes from. Ignore the ecosystem buzzwords. Look at unit economics and ask yourself if they make sense without unprecedented external conditions propping them up. For consumers, expensive equipment does not create discipline. A $2,400 bike will not magically make you consistent. What actually works? Boring, sustainable habits. A $10 gym membership, running shoes, bodyweight exercises. These work because they're affordable, flexible, and don't require a tech platform or monthly subscription. Peloton sold a seductive narrative that removing all excuses would unlock transformation. The reality? They added barriers, cost barriers, space barriers, tech dependence, and when you inevitably stopped using it, crushing guilt. Here's the final irony. Planet Fitness charges $10 a month, has 18 million members, and is consistently profitable. Peloton charged $40 a month, peaked at 3 million subscribers, and burned billions of dollars. Discipline beats technology. Consistency beats convenience. And you cannot build a sustainable business on a pandemic-fueled mass delusion. Thanks for watching. If this breakdown helped you avoid buying overpriced fitness equipment, hit subscribe. Next video, another billion-dollar fraud unmasked. See you then.